Hello. The purpose of this part of our meeting is to review the results from Brian's reevaluation. A little history first. Brian has been receiving special education services, including speech therapy and developmental therapy, or additional cognitive therapy, since he was in the 3-year-old program in Head Start. He was in 6th grade at the time of this reevaluation. The tests that were given, there's three. The tests that were given. The Reynolds Intellectual Assessment Scale, or RIAS, was given to measure ability. It's an IQ test. It provides a verbal and nonverbal intelligence index or estimate, and then those two are combined to get the composite intelligence, which provides a general summary estimate of his general intelligence. What he has to do on the assessment is there's two parts. There's verbal and nonverbal. So on the verbal part, there's two different activities that he has to do. One is called Guess What, and that is where the examiner provides clues, verbal clues, and Brian would have to tell what is being described. The other part is a verbal reasoning, which is like analogies. So heavy is to light, as little is to, or big is to little. Nonverbal also has two parts, and those are odd item out, where there's a series of pictures and he has to determine which one does not belong. And then the second part is called What's Missing, and he has to look at a picture and determine what essential part or non-essential part, what part of the picture is missing. It could be a picture of a bathroom, and the little shower head is missing, or a picture of a kitchen scene and the table leg could be missing, but there's a small detail missing from the picture, and he has to find it and determine what is missing. So when he did those things, he demonstrated a verbal IQ of 74, which is considered moderately below average. The 74 is his standard score. Average would be anywhere between 85 and 115-ish, 90 to 110. 100 is pretty much the what we think of as an average IQ. Excuse me for 1 second. Sorry about that. So, he demonstrated an IQ of 74, standard score of 74, which is the moderately below average 4th percentile, which means that he scored better than 4% of the population of his age, or 4% of the population. He scored an 81 standard score on the nonverbal, which is, that would be the odd item out and what's missing, where he just simply has to point to the one that didn't belong and where it was what was missing. That was at the 10th percentile, meaning he scored better than 10% of the population, which, when you combine those two, again, you get the composite, and his composite IQ was 74, which is considered moderately below average, or at the 4th percentile again. So these scores are consistent with previous assessments given for Brian. He has been given multiple IQs throughout the years, trying to best plan for him and determine his appropriate handicap and condition. He has always historically scored better on the nonverbal portion of the RIAS. Past results have been verbal has been a standard score of 66, nonverbal 81, a composite of 70, which is similar to where he is now. I think it's important to remember that these scores are an estimate of his intellectual ability. Because his IQ is falling in that moderately below average range, one of the things that we needed to do was to give him an adaptive behavior assessment. So the adaptive behavior assessment was completed. It measures basically 3 different areas. It's a conceptual, social, and practical. The conceptual is his language skills, literacy skills, money, time, number ability, self-direction, kind of all of those abstract concepts. The social aspect surveys interpersonal skills, self-esteem, his gullibility, his naivete, his ability to follow rules and social responsibilities and his understanding of those. And then the practical part is the daily living, the personal care, money and time are also in there. So the adaptive behavior assessment system, the 2nd edition, was given, and he scored. It's a survey, and it was filled out by his previous resource teacher, who had him for 3 years, and based it from what she knew about him. This was filled out the fall after she had him. So he scored at the 53 standard score on the conceptual composite. The social composite, he was at the 70 standard score, or the 2nd percentile, and the practical was a 63 standard score, or the 1st percentile, which means he scored better than 1% of the population. The general adaptive, when you combine all of those, was a 57 standard score. So the reason that we needed to do that was because we need to consider changing his primary handicapping condition. He has always been under speech-language impairment, but as we have discovered with the speech-language evaluation this time, he is scoring at or above where we would expect him to when we compare it with his IQ. So he no longer qualifies for speech-language therapy because he's doing better than we would expect. So we needed to look at intellectual disabilities. Basically, the 3 parts to get that label are having significant limitations in intellectual functioning. That would be that below or around 70 or as high as 74 IQ, which he falls right in there with the 74 composite. Also, the significant limitations in the adaptive behavior, which was that last set of scores according to the survey. And then also that it has an onset before age 18. And as we know when we review his history, and we've talked about this before, is that he has always fallen in this category. They've just kind of redefined it better lately. So with that in mind, with the intellectual disabilities in mind, we did achievement also just to see how he's done. And so we have kind of a baseline. The Woodcock-Johnson Test of Achievement 4th edition was given, and his reading cluster, including letter and word identification, passage comprehension, that was a 79 standard score, which is considered low. He scored at the 8th percentile, or better than 8% of the population. His math cluster, including calculation and applied problems, was a 68 standard score, which was very low, the 2 percentile, which we know that kind of confirms what we already know, that he does a little bit better in reading, yay, than he does at math at this point. So basically what that means is that instead of being under the primary handicapping condition of speech-language impairment, now he will be under intellectual disabilities. He will still be able to receive the services that he has. It's just that his primary handicapping condition will reflect what we all feel is primarily his biggest deficit or area that causes his deficits. That's it. So thank you so very much, and you are greatly appreciated.